You were in the courtroom. What did you think?
You know, it felt like a historic moment to be in the courtroom. Before the oral argument even began, there's a often sort of paperwork process where people can be sworn in to be members of the Supreme Court bar, and a lot of people were sworn in this morning. And it was people of different races, different ethnicities, different religions. You could tell, you know, families from all over the world. And it just struck me as such a powerful example of what the 14th Amendment means in America and what the foundational principle built into our Constitution that goes all the way back has made of this country. Being there, hearing the justices' questions, and hearing ACLU Legal Director Cecilia Wong forcefully explain that this is an American principle, it's a constitutional right. It was incredibly moving, and it felt deeply important.
It was. And it was so important. And it was so important for, in my view, all the wrong reasons. Because we shouldn't have been there. And I don't know if America's settled in on that point yet, counselors. I really don't. Because this argument was won for me by the Chief Justice when he said, yeah, new world, same Constitution. What are we doing here? The world between the day the ink dried on the parchment to this moment has always been new. Every day has been a new day in America, where ships and planes and trains and automobiles move people in and out from the very beginning. And this administration and this president doesn't like that, because it's not an accurate reflection of their view of what they think the country should look like. So I want to put this on the table for both of you, because it's really kind of eating at me a little bit, because I don't, to the question, why are we here? How did we get here? The President of the United States issued an executive order. There was not a law written. There was no legislation drafted. The Congress was not involved.
There wasn't an amendment to the Constitution that was drafted and then ratified by all the states.
There was no constitutional convention. How does the Supreme Court take this case up and have the argument on the merits when, from my perspective as a lawyer, I would say to the plaintiffs who brought the case, get the hell out of here. You cannot change the Constitution with an executive order. When the United States Congress drafts legislation, sends it out, and is ratified by 38 states to amend the Constitution, and then you're sued on that, come back. How did we get here? How does that happen? What did this court do, in my view, which is the biggest breach of precedent, because this case should never have been brought?
I mean, I agree it never should have been brought, and the executive order is a signature day one initiative by this president. And to me, it was the completion of 10 years of him advancing the most extreme anti-immigrant campaign we have seen. Now, this fringe legal theory that they were arguing today in the court is not new to President Trump. It has been raised and it has been funded for decades since the Civil Rights Movement and since the Immigration and Nationality Act was created, eliminating racial quotas. They have been wanting to change the definition of birthright citizenship since America became more diverse after the civil rights laws and our immigration system changed. So let's be clear that then they found their leader in President Trump. And I agree, it was outrageous in a sense that the court heard that on the merits. And I feel optimistic about the arguments, but it was really striking to me that he succeeded in getting it in front of the court in the first place, because it is an extreme fringe anti-immigrant argument.
Right, and he's also succeeding in getting it into the ether. This is what he put on Truth, whatever it's called, after he said, we are the only country in the world stupid enough to allow birthright citizenship. That is not true. About 36 countries have this law in the books. But there is the legal fight. And then there is the cultural fight, which I think we've seen the success they have had there. And then there is what I would argue would be a legislative fight if there was an actual appetite for it. Because even today, you had Justice Alito, sorry, I'm losing my pen, I'm so upset, saying essentially, well, the reason we're in this situation is because you have immigration laws on the books that nobody wants to enforce. And he made a veiled reference to people, for example, who have temporary protected status, right? There are all these folks who come here and they're just supposed to be here for a little bit, but then they're not going home, which to me felt like both a justification to answer your question of why are we here, but also a foreshadowing of where they will take this fight next. Because to your point, if this has been funded for over a decade, they're not going to be like, well, we took the fight to the Supreme Court, they decided we were wrong, and now we're going to give up. Where do they go next?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. This is the outgrowth of what we've seen in the fringiest of the fringe right-wing ideas about reshaping what it means to be America. This has been a dream of anti-immigrant activists for decades. And, you know, in some ways, what got them to this point of having the case heard in the Supreme Court, you know, isn't so much a decision really, you know, about what the courts have done. It's, you know, Donald Trump deciding to empower those within the administration, Stephen Miller and others, who make this their life's work, to attack and undermine and exclude immigrant communities and mixed status families. And I think that you're right that Justice Alito's question, you know, sheds some light actually helpfully in terms of what this case is actually about. Because you hear a lot about, you know, who supposedly this executive order is targeting. But let's talk about the reality of who it's targeting. It's targeting people who have lived here for years or decades on work visas, on student visas. Maybe they're on, you know, long-term programs like a PhD. It's people who have lived here sometimes from their own childhood, DACA recipients, temporary protected status, people who are seeking asylum, protection in this country, and people who have just lived here for years, decades, building their families, contributing to their communities. Those are the families that are being attacked and targeted by this executive order and by so many other things that the administration is doing across the board. This is part of a much, much broader effort to try and reshape what it means to be an American, to reshape the demographics of this country. But I do think that fighting this particular fight is critical, because this is the spear's point on that entire agenda. And if the administration were to succeed on this, it would be a radical change in what America means.
I mean, a drastically radical change. Look, I think it's really important that people understand that this is not just about immigrants, because I think it's very easy for folks to hear this conversation about the 14th Amendment, see the arguments that happen today and say, well, that might be unfortunate for some of those people that weren't born here and we'll see what happens, but that doesn't have anything to do with me. That is not true. I don't think this effort is divorced from his birtherism. I mean, Donald Trump came to political prominence by questioning the citizenship, the ability of the first black president to serve. They questioned the ability of Kamala Harris, because she was born to an Indian mother, a Jamaican father. She was born in Oakland, California, but is she an American? Can she serve? This is from the Immigration Law Center in January 2021. Y'all know who his is. Political career began on the very loud and wrong birther conspiracy about our first black president, Barack Hussein Obama. Once in office, Trump continued to spread misconceptions and fear by repeatedly calling for an end to birthright citizenship. These efforts echo a long tradition of using citizenship as a gatekeeping tool, one that has always harmed black people first and worst. To advance his agenda and shield his intentions, Trump relies on racist tropes about anchor babies and so-called invasions, deliberately severing the constitutional right from black history and pretending that citizenship debates exist in a vacuum, detached from the racial injustices that shape the Constitution itself. Literally, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are the Reconstruction Amendments coming out of enslavement and the chattel slavery in this country. And they want us to believe that it is about this very little narrow thing over here. I am deeply concerned.
Yeah, and I think it was so profound that this is the case the president decided to show up in person for. He didn't show up for his tariff case or any other case that was he cared about or purported to care about. He showed up on birthright citizenship, the case that could dismantle our very idea of a multiracial democracy. So for anyone who wants to believe he's de-escalating, they need to understand his anti-immigration, his mass deportation agenda has two parts. The first part is targeting people here without legal status. The second part is dismantling our idea of who gets to be an American by going after every step of the legal immigration system, including the Constitution. So that is part of it. We need to hold him fully accountable and not always point to his staffers who he does. I mean, I agree, he fully empowers Stephen Miller, Tom Homan, but it is his choice, and he showed up in person for the most extreme case we've seen before the court in some time.
So, I know we got to go, but I want to put one thing on the table because, Simone, you're right. But the other part of this is that they're looking at the browning of this country. And when you start leveling up, how should we say, baby bonuses for white women to have, 6 kids and national medals of motherhood, this is also about making sure, because black and brown babies are outpacing white babies. So all of this is in this soup that Donald Trump is stirring for this country. Y'all can either taste it and lap it up, or you can reject it, as I hope the Supreme Court does.
The great replacement theory is born out of a racist, white supremacist ideology.
There you go.
And it was on full display today at the U.S. Supreme Court. Yes, clock it, Mr. Chairman.